I need some traction. You need some traction.
Hey everybody, Lloyd Lobo here, co-founder at Boast AI and Traction Conf. This session is brought to you by Boast AI Launch Academy in partnership with BCF Ventures, Lazarides Institute, and Founder Institute. Really great session today. It's something that I've personally wrestled with and see a lot of founders and execs wrestle with. Your product is one of the most important things of your company's value, right? We're all building products to delight customers. We're all building teams to build products. But the number of people I see that don't understand product development frameworks and how to communicate in a unified language around product discovery, product and feature discovery, product prioritization, and product delivery is baffling to me. And that's why I invited Dhaval today. Dhaval, the partner at Product Manager HQ, and has a lot of experience in building products that customers love. And he also runs a course on technical product management that's been attended by hundreds of people. Previously, he worked at Honeywell, LifeLog, Wells Fargo, and he also taught data science at UC Berkeley. So I'm really excited to have my buddy Dhaval here give us a master class on technical product management. The key lessons that you need to walk away with: one, as executives, it's just not the responsibility of your product manager. I think everyone on the exec team and founding team needs to understand how products and features are discovered, prioritized, and delivered. It'll bring more calm to your company. And then the second thing is having a common language and terminology by which you communicate. Without further ado, please educate us, Dhaval.
Thank you so much, Lloyd. I'm really excited to be here in the company of a lot of my heroes and legends. I've been watching Traction Conference for the last few years, so it's an honor to be here. Thank you so much for having me. So with that, let's get started on the two main objectives that we hope to accomplish on today's webinar. One is I want you to be able to walk away from this presentation with a very clear idea on how to turn your product vision into a reality. That's one. You will have that nailed by the end of next 40 minutes. And then the second thing I want you to walk away with is a very clear vocabulary that you can use to communicate with your stakeholders, right? So there are so many different languages a product owner, a product executive, a founder has to speak, and having the right vocabulary to speak these languages when you're talking to your different stakeholders is crucial for your success and success of your company and success of your product. So those are the two goals that we're going to accomplish in next 50 minutes. Goal number one is to learn how to turn your product vision into reality. So let's talk about that. So one of the biggest challenges as a product leader and a founder is knowing which of your ideas are likely to work out and which ones are likely to fail. I consider that as it's the biggest challenge as a founder, as a product leader, right? So we are in 2020, and I am here in my home office in San Francisco area, and there is so much uncertainty, there is so much ambiguity that has resulted from the current health, social, and political crisis that we are running into. And to a small extent, this reminds me of the uncertainty and the ambiguity a product leader, a founder, has to deal with on a regular basis in extreme scenarios. Let me tell you why. There is so much information on how to build successful products. In my early days as a founder, I found myself overwhelmed and exhausted with the steep learning curve that I had to go through. And most of the product leaders have to go through this, especially if you're new to it. I read up all the popular product frameworks and concepts. I went to conferences, I went to workshops, I learned about design thinking, business model generation, the lean series. There are like 10 books on that topic. The 4 steps of epiphany, crossing the chasm, RISE framework. There's so many frameworks on product management out there. There is so much content, so much material, so many podcasts, so many workshops, so many webinars on that topic. And if you're a new product executive or a new product leader or a new product founder, you're going to be overwhelmed. And I was overwhelmed and I was lost. I did not know which framework to follow, which one to follow at what point. I was agonized. It was agonizing, and just like our current situation that we are in, I was paralyzed. So what I did is I did what I do the best, which is I took a lot of action and I failed. I failed miserably a lot. And after a few botched attempts and few years of back and forth, I started seeing the patterns. And while I'm not here to share yet another framework with you, what I do want to teach you is a guiding framework, a framework of frameworks that has helped me implement and develop products. So this guiding frameworks has helped me. What I'm about to share with you has helped me. It's a framework of framework, and it has helped me build successful products and startups that has won multiple awards and has resulted in successful acquisitions, one of which was over $2 billion. So with that, let's get started. The guiding process that I have is a framework of frameworks, and the way it goes is this. So the first part of any product development is, as a product leader, you need to know your goals. You need to understand the mission, and you need to understand the landscape of your product. And the framework that you can use for that is competitive analysis, SWOT, Porter's forces, and whatnot. There are a lot of high-level strategic frameworks that you can use, but these are the 3 frameworks that I found most helpful. The second part of guiding framework is users, right? So you need to understand which user group you're gonna serve and how are you gonna serve them, right? So for that, there is design thinking, there is business model generation. Like, those are the frameworks. If you don't know these frameworks, look them up. There are a lot of content in this frameworks. What I'm here to share with you is which framework to apply at which step of your journey, right? So if you're in the second step of your product development, you need to learn about design thinking, business model generation, and whatnot. The third step is impact, right? So you need to learn how you're going to serve your users and which group of users are going to be the biggest, are going to have the biggest impact with your product. So you need to, not only do you need to know which user group you're going to serve, you also need to segment it further and validate particularly which segment of that group you're going to serve, right? So for example, if you're building a podcast product, you need to be very clear about whether you're going to be serving, the listeners, or you're going to be serving the creators, right? And then if you choose to serve the listeners, you need to further segment by identifying which group of those listener groups are you going to serve further, right? So for that, you need to look at the frameworks like value proposition framework, the MOM test, and the lean customer development framework, right? So that's that. The next step in the journey is knowing your success metric, knowing how are you going to define success, right? And for that, knowing your goal and your criteria of success ahead of time and defining that metric ahead of time is crucial. So that's for that, you can use lean analytics. The next is ideation. This is most of the product leaders love and excel at this part of the product, which is they have a lot of ideas. They have a lot of ways to come up with new ideas. And this is, as you notice, this is the 5th step in the process, because ideas really don't mean anything unless they are structured and delivered to create value, right? So ideas are 5th step in the process, and the frameworks that you can use to become more creative is Thinker Toys. And then you can also use things like 4 steps of epiphany, testing business ideas. Those are the frameworks you can use. Testing business ideas is a great framework to validate your business ideas. There's a whole book on that topic called Testing Business Ideas. Once you come up with your ideas, I highly recommend going through the framework of testing business ideas. The next step in the process is nitpicking these ideas, right? So nitpicking these ideas to analyze risks and trade-off, to understand privacy and data and other risk and privacy concerns is where the next step happens, right? And for that, you can use this versus that. You can use the famous RICE framework. You can also use a concept of product roadmap. This is a concept that has been written a lot about. There's a whole book on this topic, product roadmap. I highly recommend you look it up. So these are the frameworks for this step of the process. And then finally, this is the final step. This is the final process of guiding framework, which is the go. This is where you go develop the solution, right? You can follow Scrum, you can Kanban, you can do design sprint, pick your choice, and you can go forward with that. So these are the 7 steps of these are the 7 frameworks, 7 frameworks that I have used to be able to structure my thoughts, to be able to remove the overwhelm, to be able to create a reality, to be able to create, to take ideas and turn them into reality. So I hope this is helpful to you. I would love to walk you through an actual example, take an idea and walk you through the actual step-by-step process. So maybe we can do that. Maybe we have enough time at the end of the lecture. So I would love to do that. At the end of the workshop, I'll take one of the ideas and we'll just walk it through all different steps of this framework. And if there is enough time, we'll be able to build a whole product along with that. So that's that. So next, so we have delivered on the first promise. It's the first promise of this webinar was knowing which framework to apply at what point in your journey and how to use this framework to convert your ideas into reality. So that was the first part of this webinar. Now let's talk about the second step, which is how to develop the vocabulary to work with your stakeholders, right? So let's get into that part. The problem in vocabulary development is multifold, right? There are one of the biggest challenges is that one of my biggest challenges as a product leader, as a founder, had been how to engage with my engineering partners on product execution. What is an effective way to engage with your engineering, with your data science, and with your infrastructure teams in a way that helps you achieve your goals and your product's goals, right? So this is where most of the product leaders who are new get stuck in this never-ending meetings. There is this endless email threads, and it just seems like you're in a loop. Every time you talk to your engineering partner, it just seems like you're in a loop. And that's how I felt. I was like in this loop that was never ending of conversations, in this loop of conversations that just never went anywhere. It never became reality. And it was very frustrating, right? So I'm here to help you get unblocked from that frustration. In the next few minutes, I'll walk you through the exact framework that you can use to get unblocked from that frustration. And I'll actually give you vocabulary so you can take that back to your workplace and apply it. So the problem, like I said, is that there is too much technical jargon. There are too many acronyms. There are too many buzzwords, and there isn't a meaningful way to grasp this concepts and this information and easily engage with your tech teams, right? So that's one of the biggest problems. And the way I solved this problem is I took courses on technical product management and I wasn't able to find any. So I had to consume all of this information in a modular way in its siloed format and then layer it up to make sense of it, right? So that's what I did. I spent a lot of time and energy going to conferences and workshops on specialized training. I also started interviewing tech leaders. I created a podcast a few years ago where I just interviewed tech leaders to learn more about their world. And then I sought out software and data science teaching jobs. I actually sought out jobs where I can teach this material to refine and field test my communication methods. And then finally, I was able to refine it and create a simple, easy to grasp framework that I'm about to present you. So let me teach you that. So any software product has some basic components, right? Whether you're dealing with a simple web application or a mobile application or a more sophisticated application like an AI product, regardless of what you're building, it will have this basic components to it, right? So let's use an example of post office to compare that with post office with real software products, right? So in the case of post office, you as a user, you're the user where you're going to write a letter or a greeting card or a postcard, and you're going to send it to the post box, right? So that's the first step of the process. You're going to put it in the post box, you're going to drop it off at the post office, and then the post person will pick it up from there and will deliver it to the back end of the processing facilities of the post office. And that's where it will get sorted, sifted, processed, and then finally, when it gets sorted, sifted, and processed from the post office back offices, it will come back to the post box, and then it will come back to the post processing facilities, and your post person will come back and deliver it to you, right? So that's the back and forth flow of a typical post office um, postcard mail example. Now, we're going to take this example and we're going to we're going to use this example, we're going to use this analogy you're going to use this metaphor to learn how software products get created and built. So let's get started on that. For any software product, you have a user, right? A user will typically have a request that whenever you open, let's say you open a DoorDash app to order some food, right? So you will open up your mobile app and or you will open up your web app, and as a user you will make a request, and then that request get handled by the front end. That's the front end. The thing that you see, the thing that you interact with is called front end, and that front end communicates your request to API, to the API layer. Think of this as the post box. So this API takes your request and sends it to the back office. Think of this as the back end. Think of this as the back office of the post office, right? So the API sends this back to the servers and the databases, and that's where it processes your request. So let's walk through this step by step. The first step is a site or an app is loaded on your screen and you do something. Let's say you open up your DoorDash app and you add a food item to your to your basket, right? So that's the first step. And as soon as you do that, an API request is made to the backend. So API takes that request and makes a call to the backend saying that, hey, this person has added this item to her basket, so let's do something about it. So then the backend receives that request and processes it, right? So the backend will take that and will communicate with the database where all the information is stored, and the server is where the logic is, and database is where all the data is. So the logic piece will communicate with the data piece and will say, okay, we need to pull this particular item and add it to the basket, right? So that's when the database will either request, delete, update, or create something in your basket, right? So, and then once it's done, it communicates back to the API. So it sends back the response to your API layer. And then finally, API communicates that back to your front end, right? So that's when you see the thing added to your basket. All of this happens in a matter of microseconds, right? So all the 6 steps happen in a matter of microseconds. Now, what I just shared with you was a simple, very simple example, and I wanted to keep things simple for the sake of communication here. But there are many layers to this, and if you're building a sophisticated product like AI, all of that happens in the back end. You have to do a lot more things. I cover a lot of that in. I would love to cover that in a future webinar or a separate course when I get a chance to work with you. So that being said, this is how web products work. So now let's walk through each and every component. Let's walk through each and every component of a web product or a simple mobile application, right? So in the next few minutes, what I want to do is take a simple software application and walk you through all the things, all the components that make up of a product, right? Your product is made of this basic components, and think of it as a Lego piece. Think of this as a Lego piece. So you are building, you're solving a puzzle, and you'll have to pull different pieces from this Lego, and you'll have to put it together so that you can fully um, build a puzzle and solve the puzzle. And the puzzle that you're solving will be based on the guiding framework, right? So you will use the guiding framework to refine your strategy. And then once you have refined your strategy, you will get into the building part of it. And that's when you will use this different components to pull things from these components to build what you really want to build. So let's go through it. So the first component is your front end. And the front end has following pieces to it. So the first piece is the reason front end exists is it's there to interact with the users. So the users, anything you can touch, see, feel is the front end, right? It's there so that you can have a simple, sophisticated, easy to experience way to communicate with the product, right? So as a user, you want to have a front end so that you're not dealing with all these complexities up front. It simplifies your user experience. That's what front end does. Examples of front end are the frameworks that are used in front end are Angular. It was built by Google. It's got a steep learning curve and it improves the scalability. So if you're building an enterprise application, Angular may be the right way to go. It's because it's highly scalable but it's got also a steep learning curve, right? So then the second framework is Vue. It's easy to learn. It's pretty fast and takes parts from Angular and React, which is the next framework I want to talk about, which was built by Facebook, and it bundles front-end code into components so that you can quickly put something together. But it's also got a steep learning curve, and it's not exactly that you can just pick up and run with it, right? So unless your engineering team has a strong technical background. So the reason I'm sharing all of this with you is you're not going to be necessarily writing the code, or you're not necessarily going to be making the architectural decisions, but having the vocabulary to communicate with your tech stakeholders will massively increase your ability to influence them, right? So the way I look at it is, let's say if you go to a meeting and if you have the right vocabulary to engage with your stakeholders, your ability to influence them will be through the roof, right? So that's where the skills will help you. It's going to be important to develop this vocabulary as a product leader. Otherwise, you're going to be delegating a lot of important decisions to your technical stakeholders, and they may or may not have the right product thinking to make those decisions, right? So it's important to be able to have this vocabulary to influence your stakeholders. So with that, the next framework is API. The next component of your product is API. API acts as a doorway between your front end and your back end, right? It helps you interact. It helps your different components interact with each other. And you will hear this a lot when people talk about API. They usually refer to API endpoints. Endpoints are nothing but the URLs at which you can access your API, right? So endpoint is, think of it as this intermediate layer where you can access your API and you can test your API. So endpoints are not necessarily good for your front end users to start accessing. They're perfect for like testing how the data flows and all that, right? So that let's talk about endpoints. Endpoints help know exactly what you need to access. So let's say if you're adding this particular flow, let's say if you're going back to our DoorDash example, let's say if you're adding a product to your basket, then it will help you know, like, okay, this is the operation that is being performed, so let's use this particular API. And API endpoints are, it helps. They are the touch points between your API and your server, between your front end and your server. Some of the frameworks that you can use for API testing are and tools you can use for API testing are Postman is a tool that is specifically developed for testing your APIs. Then there is things like request, which are like HTTP requests in Python. These are human-friendly requests, and you can use that. You can use SOAP API, SOAP UI. You can use Apache JMeter, and you can also use REST Sharp, right? So all of this may sound like jargon and it may sound like a bunch of acronyms, but if you know that, okay, when someone's talking about Postman, they're talking about API testing, it will sharply increase your ability to engage with them, because now you are part of that conversation and you're able to influence them. So it's an important thing to know. It's an important thing to be able to have a high level understanding of, even though you may not necessarily be coding. So with that, let's go into the next section, which is connecting your front end with your API. So once you build your API, once you create your API endpoints, you need to hook it up to your front end. This is the part that this is one of the components that you need to work on, as this is something that will help you utilize the business logic and computation logic that you have on your backend and hook it up with the front end, right? So that's what this does. This layer helps you connect your front end with your API endpoints. Then the final step is the backend, right? Backend and databases are some of the final steps. You need backend because that's where all the business logic and all the performance happens, right? The backend is where the business logic resides. It's also the layer through which you connect to your database. So your database stores all your data, and if you want to access your database, you access your database through your backend servers. So it helps you power your web application in that way. That's the purpose of backend. List of popular backend frameworks are Spring MVC, Ruby on Rails, Django, Node.js, and whatnot. So you can use Spring MVC as it's a Java framework, Java-based frameworks. It's very fast. It's less opinionated. When I say opinionated, what I mean is that it's less rigid. You can play around with it. It's a little flexible for you to achieve your goals. When something is very opinionated in terms of technology, it requires you to follow a specific routine, specific operation, and it's little less flexible. One of my favorite backend frameworks is Django. It's based on Python, and it's one of my favorite things because it's very easy to use. It's got a lot of functionality out of the box, and it's got fancy front end. It doesn't have fancy front end, but it can be worked to create you can use it to create front ends, interact with front ends and whatnot. So that's that. Node.js is another popular one. It's also giving a lot of functionalities out of the box. It's based on JavaScript, so you will find a lot of developers in Node.js. It's extremely customizable. It's very lightweight, and it's got a lot of built-in features. So Node.js will be your highly recommended approach if you want to go forward with building something as a quick and easy way to get started. And then final step is the database, right? So why do you need databases? Databases where you store all the information. It's where you access your data. It's where you update and access your data, and you can secure your data. It's important to secure your data in a way that can be protecting your users' privacy and security, right? So that's what database is. It's a collection. There are a lot of different types of databases. There is a a structured database. There is something called a unstructured database. So MongoDB is one of those unstructured database where you can have, you don't need a lot of predefined structure to put data in this database. So that's the key takeaway about databases is some databases require you to have this very rigid and structured approach, whereas some databases you can just store data in an unstructured format, right? So it's important to know what kind of data you're going to be having, and based on that, you can choose your database. And then finally, we do need testing. It's an important part of any development framework. So testing is where you can do continuous integration and continuous development. CI/CD is an important part of your backend and front end and web frameworks and mobile frameworks. Testing is not really, it's not what you hear. It's not what it's not like testing things. More importantly, it's more about automating it, right? So as a product leader, you want to make sure that some of your crucial components, like if you're having a sign up feature, if you're having a payments feature, if you're having upgrade feature, some of those things that you build are automatically tested every time you make an update. So every time you make an update, every time you deploy your update, every time you ship your new feature, you want to automatically test these things. And some of the ways you can test it is to have automated testing and use continuous integration and continuous development. And then finally, you will hear this a lot as well. Once your software team is done building a product, once your software team is done developing the product, they have to build it. And what building is, it's just packaging your code in a way that helps you improve your performance, right? So that's what building is. It's used to compile everything in an optimized manner. And then finally, there is a deployment, which is where you deploy your applications in any format. Usually, it's deployed on cloud. You can use different programs to deploy. There are a lot of different tools for that. We'll cover that in the next slide here. So framework for building and deploy are like Jenkins, Docker, Jira, Bamboo, and each of them has its pros and cons. So those are all the components that you need to be able to build a software product. So going back to our components list, this is it, right? So we just covered all the different things that you need to have in your software product and things that you need to be able to know about, being able to speak about as you interact with your technical stakeholders. Now, what I just shared with you was a simple web application, the framework for the components of a web application, and the frameworks that I shared with you were the frameworks for web application. So let's talk about the frameworks for mobile application. Unfortunately, I won't be able to go in depth on each and every one of those frameworks like we did for web, but I'll give you a high-level decision framework that you can use to choose your framework. Once again, this is a framework of frameworks. So I use this framework to choose which framework I need to pick. So let's say if you're building a mobile app and you need it to be a low cost and you don't need things like camera or GPS, if that's the case, then you can just choose something like Ionic or Cordova or VS Code. However, if you do need it to have some of those advanced features like camera or GPS, and you need high performance, then you can use something like native app like Xcode or Android Studio, right? And in between are cross-platform apps and progressive apps. So if you're not building an e-commerce platform, then you can, and if you're not going to need all the advanced features like camera and GPS, then you can go ahead with something like Xamarin, Flutter, or React Native. However, if you are building something related to e-commerce, you're probably going to be better off using this framework of apps like progressive web apps called Vue or React or Angular. So this is what I call the framework for choosing mobile frameworks. So next, I want I want to take a few minutes to walk you through. We have about 10 more minutes left, and I want to be able to land some of the learning lessons home. So let's go through the first framework that we came up with, which is how to convert your product into a reality, right? So we came up with this framework of frameworks called guiding frameworks, right? So let's walk through a real life example so you can bring this home, right? So let's say if you're building a let's say if you're building a product. For me, I'm in this teaching space, so for me, I would love to build a product that helps aspiring product leaders achieve their product goals. Let's say if that's the product I'm building. I came up with the idea. I'm just working on this idea right now in real time with you, right? So the idea I have is, how can I build an app, a software app, a mobile application that can help the users achieve their professional goals? Now, I know that there are a lot of products that helps people achieve their goals, but there are not a lot of products in the marketplace to help achieve specific goals, like professional goals. There are not many mobile apps. When I go look at my Google Play or Apple Store, I don't see any specific product that is designed, mobile app that is designed specifically for achieving my professional goals, right? So there are a lot of goal-based products, but there aren't any specific ones. And more importantly, there aren't any specific ones designed just to cater to one market. For instance, if I want to build a product for aspiring product leaders to achieve their career goals, there isn't any product like that. That's my first step. That's the first step, which is I'm looking at the idea, and I'm trying to understand the goal of the product, and I'm trying to understand the landscape, right? So this is where we are. I just evaluated the market, and I established the mission, which is the market. There aren't many competitors in the market. There are a lot of generic educational products, but there aren't any specialized educational products. And the goal of my product is to help product leaders achieve their career goals, right? So that's the first step. Now we're going to move on to the next, and the frameworks. And you can go a lot more in depth on these frameworks. I would recommend like spending a few hours on each of this framework to flesh out all the details of your goals and your mission and your landscape. But for the sake of time, we're going to keep it very simple here. So for the first step, you're going to focus on that. Now the second step is to understand the user groups that you're going to pick, right? So the user group that I want to pick is there are many users. Aspiring product leaders is a very high level user, right? It's a very high level user. When I think of users who I can serve for this particular user group, there are many users. There could be executives who are interested in improving their product skills. There could be founders and entrepreneurs who have ideas or services, and they want to turn those services into tech products. There could be new college grads who are interested in a product management career. There could be technical folks who are interested in transitioning to a more of a business role, and that's why they are interested in product roles. There could be business folks who are interested in more of a technical role, and that's why they are interested in product. There could be transition people. There could be people who are in their mid-career and they're interested in transitioning to a product role. There could be early career transition people who have spent a couple of years in a career and they are tired of it and they want to transition to a product role. There could be a late career transition, people who are at the very end of their career and they want to try something new. They are tired and they're bored of the same thing and they want to try something new. And there could be MBA grads, right? So I just rattled off 9 different user groups that I can have for this product idea that I have. Right? It's very important to design your product with a specific user group in mind. Very important, right? So if I try to build a product for all of these users, I'm going to create a very mediocre product. So I want to pick, based on all the things that I just listed, I want to pick, I want to pick the user group that is going to have the biggest impact. Now that's the third step of the process. Picking a user group that's going to have the biggest impact on your product, right? That can help you have the biggest impact. So I'm going to pick all the people who are trying to transition. So there could be early career transitioners, there could be late career transitioners, there could be mid-career transitioners. I'm going to use that group of people as my audience. I want to help them. I want to help people transition into product, and that's going to be the goal and impact for my software mobile application, right? So that's, once again, I highly recommend you do a value proposition canvas. That's going to take a few hours if you do that here. So do it offline, but make sure you do that. And then the next step of our product is knowing what's the success metric, right? How do I define success? For me, for this particular transition, for this particular group of people that I call transitioners, success, I'm going to measure success by saying, if they can get a new job, if they can change their job, and if they can stay in a job for more than a year, then that's my success. So let's say if I help you get a job in product management, if I help you transition into product management, if you can stay in that job for over a year, then that is my success metric. So two things. One is helping you transition, an event that helps you transition into a new role. And then second is how to keep you in that role for a year. So giving you the skills and the capabilities that will help you succeed in that role. So those are my success metrics. What is a counter metric, right? What is a counter metric? For every metric, there is a counter metric. For every metric, there is a way to game that metric. So if I'm extremely successful at achieving my success metric, my main metric, some of the counter metrics that I need to be watching out for is, how do I make sure that people don't achieve the local minima, as in some people may not be a good fit for product management. They may actually be able to do much bigger things in their life. But if I get them a product role, that's really not that's not really helping the society, right? So how do I make sure that they continue to grow, and how do I make sure that they're not stuck in that role after they transition to that role? How do I make sure that people who are really good at interviewing, and who are people who are really good at just like staying afloat, are not going to gain the success metric, right? How do I address the hiring barriers? There's a lot of structural biases in the system, and how do I address that? So those are all my counter metrics. How do I make sure there is not going to be so much saturation in the product role? So it's important to be aware of this counter metric. You may not be able to do much about it with your MVP, but as you grow, it's very important, and as you scale, it's very important that you account for your counter metrics. So the next step of the framework is, and you can use lean analytics to go deeper in that field. So the next step is to come up with ideas, right? So this is the favorite part of most of the product leaders and entrepreneurs. They have a lot of ideas, right? So what is going to be the product? What's going to be the actual experience? And the way I'm going to do this, one of my ideas, and it's important to not just get stuck and get married to your first idea, right? So you want to list off like 4 or 5 different ideas. So some of my ideas are, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a simple mobile app, and as soon as the user opens that mobile app, they can connect with their LinkedIn, and then this app that I'm building will extract all their information, and then we'll create a tailored learning path for them based on their background. So that's one idea. That's a simple idea. That's one idea. Second idea is that I'll create a personalized onboarding where I'll ask them a few questions, and based on those few questions, I can tailor. I'll just ask them a few questions here and there, a simple quiz, and based on that questionnaire, I can create a tailored learning path. Eventually, what I can do is I can create like an AI pattern to create a curated list of courses and things that they can take, and a curated list of people that they can network with and that they can get mentoring from, right? So that's the second idea. It's more of a AI-based angle where I can ask them some questions, and then based on those questions, I can offer them the upskilling, networking, and mentoring. My third idea is around choosing your role models. So let's say if I ask you to choose your role models, as soon as you open your app, I can ask you to choose your role models, and then based on your product leader role models, you can, I can, I can infer what your goals are, and based on your background, I can create a tailored path for you to grow with bite-sized learnings and networking. So that's the ideation phase. Like there are so many ideas. If you spend a little more time, you should read this book called Thinker Toys. There is a whole framework in Thinker Toys on how to come up with new ideas. So I highly recommend that. And then the most important part of ideas is validation, right? Ideas doesn't mean anything if you don't validate them. So I highly recommend going to the framework of testing business ideas when you come up with ideas. So there's a whole book on this topic. There's a whole masterclass from a very good author on how to test your business idea. So highly recommend you look it up. And then finally, not finally, but the intermediate step is nitpick your ideas. We are living in a highly, sensitive society right now, and privacy is important. It's important and it's crucial. So is risk around security. So all of those things really are crucial for your product. So how do I make sure that my product ideas are in compliance? So one of the things that come to my mind is making sure that as of all the ideas that I listed, the idea that I want to pick is the idea around going with creating a rules-based engine, which is like a questionnaire. When the user opens up an app, I'll ask them a question, and then I'll ask them a list of questions, and then I'll create a tailored learning path for them based on that questionnaire, right? The reason I chose that is because the first idea around extracting information from their LinkedIn is not everybody may have a LinkedIn profile, and LinkedIn may have its own, it may have, there may be some integration risks because I'm relying on a third party for my core information, core set of data, and that may not be the best idea. So I'm dropping that idea on the LinkedIn part. The second idea that I'm talking about, which is a questionnaire, there is a it requires users to do a bunch of things before they can engage with the product. So that's a little risky. So I'm a little wary of that, but I can go forward with that idea because it's the least riskiest of all the ideas I have. And then finally, when I'm ready to go build it, I can apply the framework of mobile application that I shared with you, which is, we can go here in this on this deck, which is, yeah, there you go. I can say I need a simple mobile app that's going to be low in cost. I don't really need camera or GPS. I may need it for networking and mentoring for the video sessions, but for my MVP to validate it, I don't really need it. So I'm going to go with Ionic, and that's the framework I'll use. So that's that. That's how I go through the entire framework. So that concludes our presentation. There are two things I would love to share with you at the end of this. I would love to share with you a framework on how to put together this Lego pieces that I shared with you. You may be overwhelmed right now. You may be overwhelmed with all the information that I shared with you. So I would love to share with you a framework to which you can pull all these pieces together and actually design your product. So a design framework from a technical point of view. So I'd love to share that with you. And then I'd also love to share a more in-depth example of how to use the guiding framework, right? So I walked you through it for the example of product management. I would love to actually share a PDF with you on how all the things that I did to walk through the guiding framework. So I'd love to share those two things with you. So the way you can get those two things is if you connect with me on my email or if you connect with me on LinkedIn. Make sure you, when you do connect with me on LinkedIn, you mention something about this webinar. Otherwise, I'll just think that you are trying to spam me. So make sure you mention something about Traction Conference. That way I can know that you're connecting with me to get those two pieces of information that I have promised you.
Awesome. And then Dhaval has a very good course on technical product management at Product Manager HQ. It's called 1 week technical product management, and there's another one called 1 week product management. So I highly recommend checking those out. The code for that is traction. What is the difference between a project manager and a product manager? I asked this question because a lot of people, they get into a product role thinking it's more project management. I got to keep the dev team on track. I got to spec features and whatnot. But when you look at it, some of the most awesome, fast-growing, successful companies with engaged customers, the product leader is spending more time on vision and talking to customers. So address that, and like, what is the difference between product management and project management?
Yeah, Lloyd, I love that question. That's something that I struggle with every day. And most of the legacy organizations don't know the answer to this question. They always confuse product managers with project managers in most of the legacy organizations. And like you pointed out, the ones that are modern, more contemporary, and have like cutting edge approach to building products, they have a very sharp differentiation between project management and product management. So the way I look at it, Lloyd, is project management is about times, managing the schedule, managing the scope, and managing the cost, right? It's a very task-based approach where you create a list of things and you keep things on track. It's more of a status-based approach. What's the status? What's today's status? Are we on track? And things like that. And it doesn't really come from this place of service, whereas product manager is more of a servant to the users and servant to the organization. Is the conduit. A product manager is a conduit of value between market and the organization. And that's how I look at it. Whereas a project manager is more of a person, and you need project managers. I'm not saying you don't need project managers. They're absolutely essential because not all product managers are good project managers. So project managers are not the conduit. They're more of a way to keep things going, keep things moving. Whereas a product manager is that little conduit through which the light flows between the users and the organization. And that's how I look at it.
A lot of times that role is one in a smaller company. Like if you're a 5-person dev team in a startup, how, you probably can't afford a bootstrap company, no outside funding, whatever. You probably can't afford to go and hire a project manager or a product manager. And a lot of the times one of the founders is playing the product visionary. And so you got to analyze your gaps and say, my goal is to deliver working software. And when I say working, it means usable, secure, bug-free software with speed in a startup, or else you can die. And so then if as a founder, your expertise is on task management, then you need to up your game on the vision side. And if your expertise is on the vision side, then you need to up your game on the task management, because the smaller the company, that role oftentimes is one, right?
Yeah, so true. That's true. The smaller the company, the more overlap is there between project manager and product manager, and the more you have to be mindful of switching your hat and strengthening your game in each of those areas. Because, yeah, like you said, if you're good at vision but you're not good at execution, then it's just going to be all dreamy, fluffy. It's just going to be like that. But if you're very good at execution, you're not going to be inspire people. You're not going to be able to sell. You're not going to be able to motivate people, and you're not going to be able to make miracles happen, right? So very well said. Thank you so much for sharing that, Lloyd.
Yeah. So let's end with one quote. Vision without action is a daydream, and action without vision is a nightmare. Dhaval, thanks so much.
I need some traction.